Stop faking for attention. That's what my brother, Mason, shouted before he shoved the handles of my wheelchair, tipping it forward, sending me crashing to the floor in front of everyone. Laughter filled the living room. Our relatives, glasses raised, exchanged awkward chuckles like it was all part of some twisted family game. I stayed still. My palms burned. My head rang. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the humiliation of watching my own bloodline smirk at my suffering. Hi, my name is Clara Reynolds. I'm 27 and 6 months ago, a car accident fractured my spine. I was told walking again would take at least a year, maybe never. But tonight, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the people I loved most had turned my pain into their entertainment. Mom hurried over, pretending to scold Mason through laughter. He didn't mean it, honey. Don't be dramatic. You can stand a little, can't you? I looked at her, the woman who once told me, "You're the strongest girl I know." Now, she looked embarrassed to be near me. And then, just as I tried to pull myself upright, the room went silent. A low voice from behind them broke through the laughter. "Excuse me," said my doctor, Dr. Ellis, standing in the doorway, still holding the Christmas gift he'd brought. Every face turned toward him. His next 5 words froze the entire room. "This woman isn't faking anything." The laughter stopped. Completely. The air snapped still. No one moved, no one breathed. The laughter that had just filled the room vanished like smoke. Dr. Ellis stepped forward, his tone even but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Clara's condition is real. Severe spinal trauma, confirmed by imaging and months of therapy. You might want to be careful before mocking something you don't understand." Mom blinked rapidly, her glass trembling in her hand. "Doctor, this is a misunderstanding. Mason was just assaulting his sister," Dr. Ellis interrupted. "And if she'd fallen differently, she could have fractured her spine again. That's not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Reynolds. That's neglect." All eyes swung to Mason. His smirk had faded, replaced by a ghostly shade of panic. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he muttered. "She's been walking around a bit." "I thought." "You thought wrong," I said quietly, adjusting my position. "You thought my suffering was optional." The room felt smaller, suffocating. Someone turned off the Christmas music. The smell of roasted turkey mixed with tension, and for once, Mason didn't have a comeback. Dr. Ellis knelt beside me, his voice softer now. "Clara, you shouldn't be here in this state. I told you to rest, but I can see why you came." I looked at him, eyes glistening. "They said I was overreacting when I wanted to stay home." He sighed, helping me back into my wheelchair. "Maybe now they'll understand what you've been carrying and what they've broken." As he stood, his gaze swept across my frozen family. "I'll be filing a report. For her protection." That was when Mom dropped her glass. It shattered, just like their image of perfection. The sound of the glass shattering felt like the perfect punctuation, the end of an illusion I'd been trapped in for years. No one said a word. Dr. Ellis handed me my coat and turned to my parents. "I've documented every visit, every setback Clara's had, including the emotional stress that's been worsening her recovery. You'll be hearing from the hospital board about this." Mom's voice trembled. "Doctor, please. We're a family. There's no need to blow this out of proportion." He looked at her unimpressed. "It became out of proportion when your son turned her condition into a performance." Mason's jaw tightened. "She's always had you fooled," he snapped. "She milks her injuries for pity." That was it. I turned my wheelchair to face him. "You want the truth, Mason? The night of the accident, I was driving to pick you up. You'd been drinking again. I lost control trying to avoid hitting a deer. And while I was learning how to sit, stand, and feed myself again, you were too busy pretending I did it for attention." His face drained of color. Dr. Ellis shot him a glare so cold it made even Mom step back. "You might want to watch your words, son. Reckless endangerment doesn't expire when someone finds their voice." I took a breath, steady but trembling. Let him. Let them all laugh again. Because next time, it won't be in my house or under my roof. Dad spoke for the first time, voice barely above a whisper. You're leaving? I smiled faintly.
No, Dad.
You're losing me. And with that, I wheeled myself toward the door. This time, no one dared to follow. By the next morning, I had already packed. The Christmas lights were still blinking in the living room when I wheeled past them, cheerful, oblivious, pretending the night before hadn't split us apart. On the dining table, I left a sealed envelope addressed to the Reynolds family. Inside, not an apology, not a plea for understanding, just documents, hospital reports, police statements, and a formal declaration transferring my legal and financial independence, signed by Dr. Ellis and the Rehabilitation Board. For months, I'd been working quietly with them to separate my guardianship and regain full control of my medical and financial rights. Last night only accelerated what was already in motion. By the time they'd wake up, the system they controlled me through, my insurance, my therapy payments, even the medical trust account Grandpa left me, would be under my name only. As I set the envelope down, I whispered, "Merry Christmas." A soft knock startled me. Dr. Ellis stood in the doorway, holding a coffee cup. Leaving early? Before they wake up, I said. Before they start pretending to care. He smiled faintly. You did the right thing. You're not running away. You're reclaiming peace. I know, I said quietly. It just hurts that peace had to come from walking away from my own family. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Sometimes love isn't about staying. It's about showing them the cost of losing you. I nodded. Then I wheeled myself out the door, leaving behind the only home that never felt like one. They wanted to call me a liar. By morning, they'd learn what truth really looked like, signed, sealed, and notarized. 2 days later, I got a message from Mom. Clara, we need to talk. Please come home. Your father's upset. Mason didn't mean it. For the first time in my life, I didn't respond. Because I didn't have to. That same afternoon, they got their visit, just not from me. Dr. Ellis arrived with a social worker and a police officer. The officer's tone was calm but firm. We're conducting a wellness and negligence follow-up based on last week's hospital report. We'll need your cooperation. Mom's voice wavered. This is ridiculous. We're her family. Exactly, the officer replied. That's why it's so concerning. When Mason tried to argue, the social worker held up her hand. The report includes medical neglect, verbal abuse, and emotional manipulation, all corroborated by a witness and digital communication records. My brother's face went slack. She wouldn't do this to us. Mom sank into the couch, whispering, What did she tell them? Dr. Ellis, ever composed, said, Only the truth. The kind that's been ignored for too long. By the time they realized what was happening, the officer had already collected their statements. Mom begged him to call me, to convince me to fix this. He simply said, It's not up to her anymore. It's in our hands now. When I got the update later that evening, I didn't smile. Not exactly. But for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Relief. Because justice wasn't loud, it was precise. A week passed in silence. Then one evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Dad. Come for dinner. No surprises. We just want to talk. It sounded rehearsed, like something a lawyer might have helped him write. But still, a part of me needed closure, not revenge. So I agreed. When I arrived, the house was cleaner than I'd ever seen it. No raised voices, no tension, just the clink of silverware and nervous smiles. Mom greeted me with 2 bright eyes. Mason kept his head down. Dinner started quietly until Dad finally said, We didn't realize how bad things had gotten. You realized, I said. You just didn't care. The table fell silent. Then Mason looked up. Clara,
I'm sorry.
I didn't think. You pushed me, I said calmly. You called me a faker while I was still trying to learn how to walk again. He swallowed hard. I know. Dad cleared his throat. We're proud of how strong you've become. It almost sounded sincere until Mom added, We just wish you'd handled things privately instead of legally. I smiled faintly. The moment you made my pain a public spectacle, You gave up the right to privacy. She looked away. Then I placed a small envelope on the table.
For you.
The hospital board asked me to deliver this personally. Dad's hands shook as he opened it. A letter confirming an official negligence review had been launched. Mom paled. Mason froze. And I simply said, I didn't come for closure. I came to make sure you read it while I was still here to see your faces. 3 weeks later, the results came in. I didn't have to imagine their reaction. Dr. Ellis called me personally. The board completed their review, he said, his voice steady. Your case is officially classified as medical negligence and emotional abuse. Your family has been restricted from making any medical or financial decisions on your behalf, permanently. I closed my eyes, letting that truth settle. Years of being treated like a burden had finally legally ended. But the real shock came the next day. Mason showed up at the rehab center. No arrogance. No jokes. Just a trembling man carrying a folded piece of paper. I wrote something, he said softly. You don't have to forgive me, but I needed you to know I understand now. He handed me a letter. Messy, raw, real. In it, he described how he'd watched our parents treat pain like weakness his whole life, and how it took seeing me stand against them for him to realize what strength actually looked like. I was cruel because it was easier than admitting I was jealous, he wrote. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just looked at him and said, don't say sorry. Be different. He nodded, eyes red. I'm trying. As he left, Dr. Ellis approached me quietly. You know, he said, most people spend years waiting for validation from those who hurt them. You made them validate your strength through consequence. I smiled faintly. I didn't need them to say I mattered. I just needed them to learn why I always did. Spring came early that year. The air felt lighter, not because my legs had healed completely, but because my heart finally had. It had been 4 months since that Christmas Eve, and in that time, my life had transformed. I'd completed my rehabilitation program, joined a local foundation supporting young accident survivors, and even started mentoring others learning to walk again. At the foundation's fundraiser dinner, I was invited to speak. When I rolled up to the podium, the crowd hushed. Cameras flashed, lights dimmed, but I wasn't nervous. People often ask me what strength looks like. I began. It's not loud. It's not cruel. It's choosing yourself when others laugh at your pain, and teaching them, without hatred, that respect isn't negotiable. I spotted familiar faces at the back of the hall. My parents. Mason. They hadn't been invited, but they came anyway. Mom's eyes glistened. Dad's shoulders sagged. Mason smiled faintly, and for once, it didn't hurt to see them there. After my speech, the audience stood in applause. I wasn't the broken girl in a wheelchair anymore. I was a woman who'd reclaimed her dignity, and in doing so, made them face what they had destroyed. Later that night, Mason approached me quietly. Your speech, it made Mom cry, he said. Good, I whispered. Maybe she finally heard me. As I left the hall, the city lights reflected against the wheelchair's frame, my silent crown of resilience. They took everything that made me human and mocked it. So I made them watch as that very humanity built the life they could never destroy. Because the best revenge is healing so beautifully, they can't look away.